Welcome to Why I Left, a podcast that explores the Great Resignation. I'm your host, Brian Aquart. Join me as I chronicle real stories from real people about the reasons they decided to leave their jobs during the pandemic and what has happened since. Hello, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of Why I Left. In today's episode, I chat with Joy White. Joy is the managing partner at the White Legal Group and founder and CEO of Flawed Masterpiece. After 18 years working for others, she decided to take a leap of faith into full-time entrepreneurship. Let's go check out her story. All right, welcome back. So our guest today is Joy White. In addition to running her own companies, Joy has her hands in a bit of everything. She empowers dynamic women, primarily Black women, in a myriad of ways, including as an employment lawyer, executive mindset coach, reinvention strategist, transformational speaker, filmmaker, online retailer, board member, and as a mental health advocate. She knows it sounds like a lot, but the truth is she is a lot, and I love her full embrace of herself. So hi, Joy. How you doing today?
I'm great. Good morning.
Good morning. So I want to thank you for being on the show. And we went through a bunch of different titles there and, where you show up. And prior to us really getting into that and how you exited during the pandemic, how about you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and where you call home?
Sure. So I am, I guess what I would say, from the Southeast. So I was born in Louisville, Kentucky, lived there, which is Midwest somewhat, but lived there my first decade of life, shifted to Nashville, Tennessee, a suburb, Gallatin of Nashville, and then finished high school in Tampa, Florida. So kind of grew up in the Southeast. I'm an only child of my mother. So yeah, that's my upbringing, so to speak.
Very nice. And what have you been passionate about professionally?
I am passionate about a lot of things, but I would say at the base, it's serving people and serving as an advocate and a supporter of people in a myriad of ways. So through practicing law, coaching, community service, nonprofits, but at the base, I've always been passionate about being of service to others.
No, that's great. And now prior to launching your own companies, tell us a little bit about your work journey and what's worked well in the environments that you found yourself a part of.
Sure. So I am an attorney by trade and I practice currently still. So my work journey, I always wanted to be a lawyer, knew that from a very early age. Watching the Cosby show, I saw Claire Huxtable and I was like, that's what I want to do, meaning that life, what her life looked like. And so she happened to be a lawyer. So that's why I chose that profession very young. Keisha Knight Pulliam is my classmate. She's 1 year ahead of me at Spelman. So we're essentially the same age. So I grew up with Rudy, though she's not Rudy, right? That's a character. So right. Her name is Keisha. I grew up with her. And so essentially that same age that Rudy was on that show, that was the age that I was watching the Cosby show and deciding hey, that's the life that I want to live. And so because Claire happened to be a lawyer, I chose that profession and never really wavered from that. So from the point that I chose it at 6, 7, that's just always what I was focused on doing. And went to Spelman undergrad, Vanderbilt Law School. I went straight through school, no breaks. And started my career at King & Spalding in Atlanta, Georgia, which is a very international firm with its headquarters in Atlanta. So started there, worked there my first 5 or 6 years, left, went to another firm, started my own firm about I was at that other firm for only a short period of time and realized I wanted to try to be in business for myself. Started the White Legal Group first in 2010 and grew that firm to a point where I had staff and associates and attorneys, paralegals, then co-founded another law firm with 3 other amazing Black women employment attorneys. That firm was McFadden, White, Spratland, and Davis, with 3 other amazing Black women attorneys. I served as managing partner of that firm for a couple of years. Long story, then went to Morehouse. So then I was general counsel at Morehouse College and served there for a little over 4 years as general counsel, chief compliance officer, board secretary, all the things. And
All
I guess
all
we'll
the
get to what
things.
I'm doing now, but that's been kind of my career journey.
No, definitely. And now, so what I love is that hook to the legal field, right? Like, I'm a recovering employment attorney, right? So I know the feeling, right? So I see and hear the draw. But now you talked about kind of ending up prior to moving on in higher education. And so what drew you specifically to higher education and that type of role?
Well, as you know, for every attorney, being a general counsel is kind of like if you are interested in working in a company and not in a law firm, like that, you can't go any higher than that role as in a legal function. And so I always had aspirations of being a general counsel. Never really knew how my path would get there, but the opportunity presented itself to join Morehouse as the associate general counsel. So in many ways, it was more about let me get some experience in-house because prior to being at Morehouse, I had never worked outside of a law firm. I had only ever been outside counsel representing clients. And so Morehouse was very appealing because, as I mentioned earlier, I went to Spelman College undergrad. So I, feel a strong affinity to Morehouse. And it was a great opportunity to get in-house. Once I was there, I pretty quickly, went from associate general counsel to general counsel in a fairly short period of time. And, I always thought, hey, as a student of the AUC, which is the Atlanta University Consortium, which is all of the schools in it. So that's Spelman, Morehouse, Morris Brown School of Morehouse School of Medicine, and then ITC. So there's five, and Clark Atlanta University. So as a student in the AUC, I felt very close to that environment. It was kind of like a homecoming of sorts, coupled with being able to experience my dream of being an in-house attorney.
No, that's great. Yeah, kind of marrying both worlds there. So what I'd love to do is kind of take you back now, right? So obviously this show is really about, the people moving on during the pandemic. So I want to kind of transition to talking about March of 2020, right? And COVID really hits us. We're introduced to it. We don't know it as the pandemic yet, but talk a little bit about how the pandemic affected you.
It's funny. The pandemic affected me probably in an unusual way for some. So during the season that I was at Morehouse went through a lot of transition. And so I was there during that time frame and was honored to support Morehouse in the roles that I supported Morehouse. But what I will now say, I was burnt out. Wouldn't have used that language, wouldn't have called it that at the time. But once we moved home. So let me back up. I was at Morehouse when the pandemic started. And I was a part of making decisions about sending this, do we send the students home? Are we cutting classes? Like what are we doing? And so I was very instrumental in all of those decisions while also being a single mother of two teenage sons. So while I'm, supporting Morehouse and trying to navigate what we're going to do with that entire campus of young men, I was also navigating my own children and how, what's going to happen there. And so at some point it was like, well, everybody go home. Both my kids were sent home and we made a decision to send the students at Morehouse home. And so I was home and shockingly felt more relaxed than I had felt. So in the middle of a pandemic, and this was my 40th birthday also. So my birthday is March 14th. And so literally the world shut down on March 14th, 2020,
Wow.
which was my 40th
Yeah.
birthday. So
Yeah.
that was, yay, that's how I got to celebrate 40 was with the pandemic, like the literal day that the world shut down. And I felt a sense of relief, even though I was still, the world is right in the middle of a crisis that we don't really fully understand the magnitude of. But simultaneously, I felt a sense of relief and more relaxed simply from just being home and not being in the space of, just a whole lot going on every day and just the hustle and bustle of life, both as a single mother and as an executive in higher education. And so for me, I was like, oh, this is weird. Like we've got a problem here because I'm feeling relaxed and more peaceful. And not that I was just as concerned as everyone else, but it really highlighted for me how hard I had been going for so long that a global pandemic felt like a break for me immediately. Like before everyone started, the great resignation, I decided to leave well before that. Now I stayed at Morehouse till the fall, but just during that time becoming increasingly aware of how little time I had been devoting to myself and my own well-being. So just being home and taking nature walks with my dog and my son, and also seeing how they were actually in some ways doing better at home, which is a whole nother discussion. I mean, it was weird for everyone, but I still recognize we seem as a family to be doing better at home and not me working so hard and them in school and just the rigmarole of daily life. I had, child care, a nanny and a housekeeper and all these things. So I let them because I was home. And so just, it was a big pivot, but that was the first time that I realized that I may have been pushing myself in an unsustainable way for most of my career, actually.
Well, I'm really glad you raised that because, I remember when we initially spoke about that, it was something that really hit me, right? That a time of so much instability represented a time of calm for you. So I'm glad that you mentioned it. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move along. But, so you start learning about these things and recognizing this in yourself. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like at Morehouse during this time? When we're, because I haven't had any higher education, folks from higher education come on and talk about what that was like, especially someone who was making the decisions of that time to go home or we're staying here. So what was that like?
I mean, it was definitely like a fire, right? I mean, the beauty of the AUC though is that there's other schools. So we quickly kind of had a core group of people on each campus that were responsible for kind of making these decisions. And in many ways, we wanted to try to if we could, make similar decisions as the other schools. In no way are any of the schools bound by any authority to have to do, like Morehouse and Spelman and Clark can do different things, but it was a blessing to be in a community where it wasn't just one institution that was trying to make those decisions for their students. There was definitely a collaboration, but it was chaotic. I mean, you had the news was just so much for everyone and trying to follow the CDC guidelines, which were changing frequently. And so it was really a matter of how do we make the best decision based on what we know, which no one had ever experienced anything like this. And particularly for us, because we did not have online education really stood up at that time. Some schools who already had online education stood up were able, I think, to make a decision and be able to pivot pretty quickly because the framework and platform were already there. Morehouse did not have that. And so it was really a decision of, okay, are we sending kids home just to be home and then work remotely? Or are we closing the school, which has financial aid implications and, which is significant. And in terms of people just being sick and how do you manage that? And do we keep kids here? We don't keep them because it was right after spring break. So our first decision was, do we let young men come back? I call everybody a kid who's younger than me, but these are grown people. But do we let the students come back? Because they had just been on spring break. And so there was fundamentally their safety and the campus safety, the safety of the students was the most important issue. And so we had to make decisions around whether we let them come back. And I think ultimately we did not. So for people who were not back, we had to make some decisions pretty quickly because some students were back and then we're like, okay, now you have to leave or your parents have to come. It was very, very challenging. It was not easy for the students, their families, or the decision makers. And I think sometimes people don't realize the people who were making decisions at that time had no more experience dealing with something like this than anyone else. But we had to make some pretty fast decisions based on what we had available. So it was very, very stressful time, a lot of fear, but you did have the leadership, right? So you had people that showed up and did what leaders do, but it was definitely a very emotional and kind of complicated time coupled with community. Okay, let's get the community of leaders together and let's try to collectively come up with some decisions that are best for the collective. But it was a lot of chaos, right? And so even once we decided to send everyone home, right, we're still then trying to figure out how do we get the faculty set up to be able to teach. So again, our faculty as a whole were not at the point where they were doing online education. So we were in the process of rolling out online education, but it was not something that Morehouse had in place. So we had to completely stand up online education during the pandemic in order to continue the students matriculating. So you're having to teach faculty, some, very distinguished faculty that have taught for 40, 50 years. Hey, here's how you get on the Zoom and get the lights and camera action. I mean, so it was a lot. It was a lot. And meanwhile, funds have been paid, right? Like people have paid for that semester. And so now you're looking at, if do we close the school, then we have to refund all this money. So these were all the kinds of things that we were having to navigate, particularly for a private school that's higher education institution, I guess, because we have these federal funds, right? And we have tuition that's being paid that had already been paid for that semester. And so there are implications around whether we close the school, just it's closed, versus trying to maintain it. But even with that, you had people who were like, we paid tuition for in-person instruction. And a big part of the AUC is the community and the camaraderie. Like that's a significant part of the Morehouse Spelman Clark experience, is being there in person, the family, the village. And so then looking at, and certainly some parents being concerned, well, I'm paying for my student to be there and have the Morehouse experience, not online. So there were just, a lot of, all those decisions were having to be made pretty quickly because the world was moving fast. And of course, safety was paramount. So the first priority at all times was everyone's safety. But right thereafter, it's how do we navigate the logistics of this? What are the implications on the financial dynamics and federal aid that Morehouse was receiving? So all of those things were decisions we were having to make. So every day was that level of decision making.
Yeah, so much going on. And clearly everyone, really had to change the way that they worked during those shutdowns. And so now, we talked earlier a little bit about, this feeling of calm that overcame you during this time. So thinking about that, how did the pandemic really start to affect your relationship with your job? Now that you're at home, you're experiencing this calm, recognizing things that you may had not recognized before, how did it change the relationship?
Even before the pandemic, I had some awareness that, hey, this might be a lot for me. And all of this is public information, but Morehouse went through a lot of transition during my time there. So I started at Morehouse in 2016 and left, fall of 2020. And during that time, there was several changes in leadership, both at the presidential level and at the board level. And so I was there as a senior leader and executive during all of those changes, and we had our reaccreditation. I tell people I was there for 4 years, 5 presidents. So that clip of just transition at an executive level and being at the executive level, being a part of that, really trying to stabilize the school. I mean, the way that I viewed myself at that time was, I need to be of service to this institution. Morehouse College is Morehouse College. And during these transitions, I felt very personally responsible for being a source of stability for the institution, not necessarily thinking about the impact that was having on me personally. Because as I mentioned earlier, right, my passion is service. And so it's just kind of my default is how can I be of service? And so I recognize that Morehouse College during some of those leadership transitions definitely needed me to be of service. And I was called upon to be of service and to take increasingly more and more responsibility as these transitions were happening. I was the leader of several national searches for new executive leaders. I was the chair of the current president, David Thomas. I was his transition chair. I was on the committee to help select him. So I was kind of a part of all of the changes while also maintaining the day-to-day of the roles that I was in, groups that I was responsible for, while single parenting 2 sons. And so I've always just been focused on how can I be of service to others. And it wasn't really until I got home that I realized the level of constant, frankly, anxiety and stress that I was experiencing like on a day-to-day basis. At some point while I worked at Morehouse, I started getting migraines daily. I've never had migraines in my life, ever. And at some point I started getting daily migraines. And I was just, take some goodies for it and keep it moving. And then pain in my body and all these, and I just kept pushing past it. I didn't go see anybody about it. It's like, get up, go to work. And no one was pushing me to do that. I was pushing myself to do it from a place of, this is just what you do. And so once I got home, I was aware how heavy and overwhelmed I was frankly feeling, but was disconnected from that. Like my body knew and my spirit knew, but my conscious brain was nowhere connected to that. So it was just every day you get up and you do what you got to do. But once I got home and was not just kind of in that mode of get up, get dressed, drop the kids off, go to work. Once I was able to slow that down just to even not go anywhere every day, it became very clear to me that something was wrong. Like I was not living my life in a sustainable, kind of healthy way from a mental health basis, from a physical health. I had not prioritized that. It was not even on my list of priorities. And then I recognized this isn't living, like whatever I've been doing for this amount of time is not in service to my greatest good. And so that was, or my children, or ultimately the people that I'm called to serve. And so it started the process for me of like, what's really going on here? A lot of introspection and self-reflection. I started meditating every day, going out in nature. And I realized because I did guided meditation sometimes. And so it would say, they would do these things called body scans, relax your face, your muscles, your feet, your legs, all those things. And I didn't realize until I started doing that, I was walking around like this all the time. Literally, because when they said relax it, and then you feel kind of how relaxed you're getting, like, well, what have I been doing every day? Because I don't. And then I realized I literally basically was like, just like this. I had back pain. I left out that I had to start going to a chiropractor. I had such severe pain in my back and neck that, I was like, am I going to have back surgery? And they were literally like, it's just stress. But it was so severe that I couldn't walk at some point. Like, not that bad, but I was in excruciating pain and had to go to the chiropractor like 3 times a week. But prior to someone making that suggestion to me, I literally thought I was going to have back surgery. And it was stress.
And, that's a lot. And I'm a huge fan of guided meditation as well. So looking back at this time, what's one thing you would have done differently this specific period?
I probably would have left sooner than I did. I probably would have left sooner because I still didn't leave till fall. So, this is COVID's March and I left like August, October. I probably would have left sooner, but once I realized like, hey, this isn't healthy for me. And again, because of all the COVID and different transitions, I lost a lot of my staff. So again, I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of responsibilities over different kind of areas of the college, and through kind of just some attrition and then some just changes that had to be made as a result of COVID, some, staffing issues. It resulted in me losing the majority of my staff, but I still had all the same responsibilities. So none of my areas that I was responsible for decreased. And so I was trying to figure out how to help transition the school, kind of even once I realized, hey, this might not be working for me. How can I prepare the school for my absence? And because of that, I still stayed longer trying to work through some of those things, all while still being under a great deal of stress doing that. So, I think a big part of what I've learned about myself, and which is part of what I coach my clients around, is you cannot be of service to other people to the detriment of yourself. Like, it cannot be to your own detriment. And you have to be really in tune with yourself to know where that line is. And you have to kind of make decisions around your own well-being being the priority. And then you serve people. like after that. And, all the self-care isn't selfish, whatever. I don't care what you call it. Like, you can't be serving people from an empty cup and then really put yourself at risk, your own physical, mental, emotional well-being at risk in the name of serving others. And again, that's not something that's talked about a lot. It's serve, serve, serve. It's all I've ever known is serve. And then to realize, like, there's a dark side of service if it is to the detriment of the service provider. So if I could do anything differently, I would have left sooner because it was that severe for me. But even once I knew it was severe, I still stayed longer.
Yeah, which is a great transition, right? And so, after being at Morehouse for about, you said like 4 years, you resigned in October 2020. So as the show notes, so ultimately, why did you leave your job during the pandemic?
I left for me. Like, it was 100% a take care of yourself. Like, the way that you've been doing life, essentially. So Morehouse was definitely a part of that, but it was really as a whole, me really coming to grips through meditation, prayer, journaling, self-reflection, kind of having more time to do that, getting really clear that I had neglected my own well-being for a while. And I did not, because there was no staffing, right? Because I did not see a way where that level of stress would change. If anything, I saw it continuing in terms of the impact on me personally. And so I left because I decided that I have to be more important than Morehouse. And for a lot of people, that could sound crazy, but it's not, because everyone on an individual level has got to prioritize their own well-being. Like, this isn't like, don't support people, but I think there's not enough discussion around people who are like, have a servant's heart, or that are people that just fundamentally lean towards serving others. The dark side of that can be that they do not do the things that are necessary for themselves to maintain their own health, mental, physical, spiritual health. And you are never actually, you're not fully serving the other person or entity or group. And you're certainly not able to live your full purpose. Like, I believe everyone has a purpose, and you cannot do that if you are burned out and like on the verge of like breakdown burnout. Like, not I'm tired, but like your body is shutting down, like, and you're still pushing. That's what I was doing. And so I left for me to say, Joy, you're more important than anything, really. And you've got to see that first. It's not for anybody else to see. Like, you have to see that and then take action to show yourself.
I'm really glad that you found that, right? And so, one of the things I thought that was interesting too is you made, and I'm always interested, and I really kind of nerd out with when people make this decision, right? What that impact is, right? And so what I remember seeing was that you made this decision without a plan, right? And so how did it impact you to go through, you're experiencing all of this, like you mentioned, you have 2 teenage boys, now you're getting ready to leave, but you don't have, like, that's your bird in the hand, but you don't have anything. So how did it impact you make this decision knowing that that was the case?
I mean, I'm a person of faith, and I just trusted God. Like, once I was super clear that like the way you're living your life is going to kill you, like literally, not figuratively, like literally, you are having migraines and back pain and your spasms in your body. Like, you are going to drive yourself into an early grave. Like, once that became clear to me, and it wasn't for a long time, but once it became clear, so I did look for other things. So some of that time I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can find something else. But it's like the middle of a pandemic, right? Like, everyone's shutting down, closing, nobody's hiring, especially executive level people. They're trying to figure out who they can let go at the executive level. So I did look around a little bit, but then once I realized how burnt out I was like, I had some runway, I had some savings, and I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, you can either wait till you end up in the hospital, or you could do it now. Like you can get ahead of it or not. Like if you're in the hospital, you're still not able to work and do things. So do it now. God will provide. And that's the truth. I am a planner. I am a person that would not normally leave a job, especially as a single mother during the middle of a pandemic. But that's why I'm so passionate about what I do now, because everyone has to see, like, you are more important. Like, you have to be more important to yourself in order to do any of the things that you're called to do in this world. And if you are bumping up against like literal burnout, like, and even worse than that, just really severe mental health, emotional, physical health, there is nothing more important. There's no job. There's nothing more important. And so I still felt peace. The irony is, you would think that it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? My overwhelming feeling was a sense of peace and confidence and calm that you're doing the right thing and things will work out.
No, that's great. And so, it's actually a perfect segue into kind of what you're doing now, right? And so tell us some of the things about what's happened since you left, and tell us a little bit more about Flawed Masterpiece as well as the White Legal Group.
Sure. So, when I left, because I am the type A person that I am, I was like, okay, let me leave. But then immediately it's like, okay, well, what do I do now? And I definitely had this strong sense of wanting to share my story. That's something that I had felt led to do previously, but never really thought about how I would do that and in what fashion. And so I just started, planning, like, okay, what would be my dream life? And that's something that I go through with my clients, my coaching clients. But it was really, okay, you looked at Claire Huxtable and thought, hey, this is who you want to be. And you focused on that exclusively and you achieved it of sorts. Now dream a new dream. Like, it's time for you to dream a new dream, Joy. So I started dreaming a new dream. Like, what would it look like for me to have a life where I was in service to others and not to my own detriment and I'm walking in my full purpose. And so I spent several months in prayer, meditation, devotion, thinking about, what do I want to do now? Because I still practice law. And so I relaunched my law firm so that I could take on clients. So I've only ever worked in Atlanta. Most people that know me as an attorney. And so people actually pretty quickly would reach out to me like, hey, are you taking any clients? So I set the White Legal Group up as a way to continue to earn income while I really thought about, like, what am I here for? And then I came up with Flawed Masterpiece through a whole series of things. And so Flawed Masterpiece is around female empowerment, Black female empowerment. And so through that, my business, I do coaching, I do speaking, and I also have wellness product, e-commerce products, and then digital products, courses, ebooks. And the whole premise is around, first, empowering Black women to live the life that they want to live, but also giving them permission to think outside of the box, to dream up a life that does not require them to sacrifice their well-being. So at the premise of it, my position is that Black women in the United States are taught from a myriad of ways, external, outside of the community and inside of the community, that ultimately we are to sacrifice for everyone, for our families, for our careers, for the community. And there really isn't a very powerful voice that says, Black woman, you are worthy of joy and peace and leisure and rest. And, you can thrive and live in abundance. Like, that whole space, there's no messaging, there's no voice, there's no one like, hey girl, take care of yourself, which is part of the reason why I continue to push myself as far as I did. And when I think about my friends and my acquaintances, I'm like, this is not unique to me. This is actually something that I see almost in every Black woman that I know. It doesn't even matter if they're a professional executive, or it's all about push and push and push and serve and take care of. And so, but the woman, is never the subject of it. That was my personal reality, all while looking amazing and being applauded and getting promotions and raises, and at no point was I or some of my clients even self-aware, like this isn't healthy. Like we're not taking care of ourselves. So Flawed Masterpiece was really born out of my own healing journey and then recognizing how I could support other Black women because I recognize this is a problem and I don't see a solution in the market. I don't see anyone that is supporting that. And really, I view it as a ministry because I believe that Black women should thrive like all other human beings on the planet. But there's some work around how to unlearn some of the indoctrination that we receive through, again, the church, our family, education. It's not just one place and amongst each other. And so I decided to take that on in this business. And so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, no, and I like that. And I've read some of your content, online, and you discuss in the work that you do this intersection between like rebellion versus conformity, right? And so I thought that was very interesting. And given some of the things that you had mentioned as well, how do you then go about exploring that in your practice with your clients? Because I heard you mention something about this self-awareness that hits you and others that it's like, how do you handle that?
Sure. Well, I would say in terms of the conformity versus rebellion, it's really about integration. Like the two phrases I like to use are radical self-acceptance, which is really what I promote through my business, and integration. And when I say integration, it's not this or that, it's this and that. So it's serve others and take care of yourself. It is have boundaries and know when it's time to kind of stretch a little bit, but hold those things in the same place at the same time and kind of recognize that life really is about the integration of all of these things. So I'm still a lawyer. I'm still a mom. I'm still all the things, but I also have carved out significantly more time for myself in this season of life than I ever had. And so the reality is that time was always there had I prioritized it. And also what that means is when I give myself more, other people get less. Like that is a real thing. Like there's not more of me. It's learning how to pull back and prioritize the places that I care most about and then devote my time to those areas. And it's about wholeness because I have a background, I have a story, and a big part of my healing journey and this business was around recognizing that in some ways I was trying to run from my story. Like I chose Claire at that very young age because the life that I saw on that screen was very different than the life I was experiencing. And it was kind of like this fairy tale. And then because I'm a type A person, it's like, well, I'm going to march my way to that fairy tale, this kind of romanticized version of life that I view being a lawyer. Like, I'm like, oh, when I become a lawyer and get married and have kids, I'll be dancing on the stairs, like on the Cosby show, like, and we'll just be singing and dancing. I mean, I literally, because I decided this at a very young age. So I legit thought that's what life would be like. And once I got there, I'm like, oh, this is, I mean, not that life is miserable, but wasn't nobody dancing on the stairs.
Like, just a little different, right?
It's a little different. But then doing that work and realizing, like, why was I so disconnected from my pain and literally the physical pain that I was experiencing and the burnout? How was I so disconnected from that? And realizing some of that had to do with being disconnected from my story and having a lot of shame around my background. So part of my business, also Flawed Masterpiece, is around seeing the beauty in parts of your life that you view as dark or negative. And unfortunately, for women and Black women, there's a lot of trauma that Black women experience. And that's not always dealt with. And so what I did and what some people do is try to jump on top of that with performance and perfection. And that was my story. So that I'm adding that's a big kind of foundational position with my business. It's targeted towards women who are really struggling, but literally might not be aware of it, just like me, like at a point of like literal physical, mental, emotional instability, yet not at all connected to it, and demands continuing to be placed upon her. And she's still showing up for that. So that little situation is not something that anybody's talking about. And most people aren't even having that conversation with themselves. And so part of the rebellion and conformity and integration is kind of life is messy, but all of your story is important. All aspects of you are important. You know, your career and your prestige, all that's fine and important. So it's not, let me come over here, forget all of that, forget everything I worked hard for. Let me just come over here and do something different. It's all of that. I am all of that, you know, and we all are. And it's really kind of marrying that kind of holistic living. So mind, body, soul, you know, it can't just be career and finances and prestige. That is a losing path. Like you can't only focus on those things because it will be to your own detriment. And that's not just for Black women. That's just, I believe, a reality of the human experience. But I do think Black women, the intersection of being a Black woman in the United States has its own additional challenges that cause us sometimes to not do the work, to slow down and to really create holistic, healthy lives.
And I appreciate you raising awareness to that. And I, love the mission of your company. So kudos to you for all the work you're doing in that space. So now what I love about this is it's been a couple years now since you've left at the time we're doing this interview. And so now when I'm asking around, what have you learned about yourself throughout this whole process of, betting on yourself, becoming a full-time entrepreneur? I should have mentioned, I found you on LinkedIn, right? And so I saw your beautiful post, right? Obviously I engaged with it and I'm glad you came on. And so taking all of that into account, everything that we've just discussed, and now you're, 2 years into, this full-time entrepreneurship, what are some of the learnings that you're taking away now?
Sure. One of the biggest learnings, I probably have two or three, but one would be, especially if you are interested in doing like a mission-based or passion-based business, where it's really driven from something that is a like life mission, getting super, super clear and taking whatever time is necessary to be crystal clear on your why, because you have to always come back to that as you learn new things about entrepreneurship and running businesses and all the things. Like some businesses are around profit and it's not about a why. Like all businesses are not about a why, but if you're a solo and it's a mission-based business, you have to stay really grounded in the why so that you don't get lost in the process. Like as you start learning how to do things as a true entrepreneur, you can get pulled in a lot of paths if you aren't really grounded in your why. Why did you start this business? The second lesson I would say is be very clear on who you're serving, like who is your audience. That's paramount. Like, why are you starting the business and who are you serving? Because that should really dictate your services and your products. Sometimes, like I'm a very type A person. And so you start learning different things. You're like, oh, I could do this or I could do that. And in entrepreneurship, there's no limit of the number of things and ways that you can go about running your business. And so really thinking about who am I? Why did I start this business? Who am I trying to serve? And from there, really thinking about how can I be of service? And so what are the products and the services that will be most valuable to them? And then querying them, like doing market research, actually having conversations with people before you start the business. I would say the third thing would be your financing and really thinking about what kind of capital you need. I did not do that. So I definitely did kind of like a bootstrapping, like using my own money, investing it into the business, learning a lot as I went, but also spending a lot while learning. I would definitely say getting a mentor, like a seasoned entrepreneur. And it actually doesn't even matter what kind of entrepreneur they are, but getting a mentor pretty early on that is seasoned in starting a business, because entrepreneurship is not at all similar to anything else where you're working for someone. It's a totally different beast. You have to take risks. You have to do things before you're ready, but you can have more guidance if you're doing it under kind of the direction of someone who has experience running and starting and running successful businesses. And I would say the last thing would be know when to cut it off also. Like know when, hey, I tried it. Okay, this didn't work, or this aspect of this didn't work. So if you've got like different, business verticals, you try something, doesn't work, you have to be very decisive as a entrepreneur. You can't kick the can down the road. Like there are consequences for that. You do have to do things long enough to let them get traction, but then you also have to know when to cut it off. So it's entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart, right? Like you have to be a risk taker. You have to be willing to bet on yourself. You have to be willing to fail, which is probably the biggest learning from me. Like prior to starting this business, I would never have been a person that said, fail fast. You hear all this. You learn from failure. Fail fast. I was always the person that's like, that's bullshit. Like, I do not believe in failure. Like, I don't know why people are out here glamorizing failure, only to then become an entrepreneur and fully understand that it is absolutely necessary. And it is actually part of the journey. It's not possible to be a successful entrepreneur without experiencing some failures. Doesn't mean it's permanent down on your face failure, but you will experience things that don't go perfectly. And so that probably the biggest learning for me is learning how to accept that and keep moving as opposed to trying to operate in perfectionism, which is something that I spent a lot of my life trying to do.
No, I appreciate that. And, a part of this show, what I love to do is really get some advice for the folks who may be listening from the guests that we bring on. And so for those people who may have a similar situation to yours, right, but really are unsure about what to do next in the workplace, right, feeling burnout or whatever the case may be, maybe not even recognizing that they're burned out, what would you suggest that they do?
Well, I'm a huge fan of meditation. So I started with the Calm app, which I don't get anything from this, but the Calm is CALM is something, it's an app on your phone and you can just start meditating daily, like 10 minutes. There's tons of guided meditations on there. I think the big thing is you have to slow your mind down in order to connect with yourself. And so if you're a fast-paced person or if you're experiencing anxiety, like the idea of like clarity, that's not a thing. Like you have to slow down to get clarity and you have to kind of slow down, but that's more than a notion. So the idea of just slow your brain down. Okay, well, if you don't have experience doing that, that's not that easy. But starting a meditation practice, a daily 5 to 10 minute practice of just training your brain literally to just slow down. There's all kind of science behind it. It can be trained. Like you can teach your body to drop into kind of like a relaxed state. That would probably be my number one thing, because until I started a daily meditation practice, I was not connected with myself. I wouldn't have been able to even hear clearly or see any of the things that I eventually saw had I not committed to a daily meditation practice, because otherwise I was just running. My brain was running. I was running. So I couldn't even see how tired and overwhelmed I was. So I would say that's a really easy one. It's not that it is easy, but it's accessible. It's something that you can do. Also journaling, 5-minute journaling. They have these things, bullet journals. There's all kind of things, because it's really about getting out of your conscious mind and accessing like your subconscious and just the rest of your body, because your body knows what you need. And that is the truth. Your subconscious and your physical body, it is never unclear about what you need to do. It's the conscious mind, which is what we're trained to do, that is overdeveloped in most people in a productivity capitalistic world. Like the conscious brain is like driving things, but it can have you disconnected from like nature and reality and what you really need. So those would be things that I would do. And then dream. That would be my last thing, is give yourself permission to dream again. Like the same way that I was that little girl looking at Clara Huxtable and the Cosby show and like, ooh, I can do that. I didn't know lawyers. I didn't know anybody who had lives that looked like that. I didn't know people that had money or any of the trappings of what I saw on that show. But as a little girl, I gave myself permission to have it, like immediately. Like I was like, oh, I'm going to do that. And that was it. Like, and I did it. I think the thing is when we get older, we stop dreaming. Like we stop envisioning like a life that would be fun or healthy or exciting for us, whatever those things are. And so I would really recommend like just practice imagining a life, like envisioning a life that you would truly enjoy. And you don't have to put limits on it, however much money, relationships, service, philanthropy, boats, houses, whatever. And I do this with my clients. Just practice giving yourself permission to live an abundant life, just in terms of thinking about it. Because a lot of us, like when I start with my clients, they can't do it. They're like, this is silly. This is like, what are we doing? I'm like, telling you, like, it's trying to access those aspects of our lives that we are so disconnected from, and then giving ourselves permission to really tap into those things. My life is happier than it's ever been. It's not perfect by any stretch, but I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. And I wouldn't be if I hadn't first given myself permission to be happy.
I love that. And look, and so my last question for you is really, what type of impact are you looking to the future now? Are you hoping to have in this next chapter of your professional life?
I really want to create a community. I've been thinking about that a lot in terms of Flawed Masterpiece and what is it that I'm really trying to do here. I really want to create a space for basically women that don't really fit anywhere. And that could be for any number of reasons. I've spent most of my life kind of felt like trying to fit into different places, but never until recently kind of being like, where you are is where you are and who you are is who you are. So trying to create a space for other women to come into that and to start living a fully integrated life that acknowledges all aspects of their lives. So I want to do more speaking and more, spread this message more. Like I want to impact women that are my age and older, but also particularly younger women as they're envisioning their lives, giving them some other options. Like, okay, I could go this route, I could go that route, or I could do all the things route. Like, I want to do all the things and actually being an example to them of a path that honors the whole of who they are and doesn't require them to choose one aspect or another, and validates the worthiness of the whole of who they are. That's the impact that I would love to have, so that you don't have people that are living kind of in these silos and fractional pieces of their lives, but really are operating in their full authority, because that's where their purpose comes from. I believe everybody has a purpose. And I believe the only way you can operate in it is if you're operating in your full kind of sovereignty and authority as a person. So it requires whole living.
I love that. I love that. Well, look, this was a great conversation. Our intro call was really good, but when you brought it today, Joe, you brought it today. So I just want to say thank you for taking some time to speak with me. Look, I randomly reached out to you on LinkedIn, and so I'm happy that we connected. Loved hearing your story, and would love for us to stay connected as well. Love for you to share where our listeners can support you and find you.
Sure. So I have a website. It's joywhite.me. And that is the hub for all things Joy White. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Joy White. And I have a lot of handles, but joywhite.me is really the website that you can go to and learn everything about the work that I'm doing, both in law, e-commerce, coaching. It's really your one-stop shop for all things the Joy White experience.
I was waiting for that because I was going to say the experience that is Joy White. So I thank you for that. And look, that'll do it for today's episode. Again, I want to thank Joy White for joining me today. I'll be sure to share her information in our show notes. And look, I hope you all have a great week. We'll see you next time. And thanks again, Joy.
Thank you.
Thanks again for listening to Why I Left. Be sure to join us next time for more stories from the Great Resignation. Visit us at www.whyileft.com. www.whyiLeft.co. That's whyiLeft.co. And subscribe to the show on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.